Good morning, everybody. I'm Dominic Harvey. I'm the Commercial Director for CWJobs. We have been going 21 years now, supplying tech talent to UK businesses. And traditionally, that looks like very experienced hires, very highly skilled hires. But this is a bit of a departure for us because we're actually looking at the new tech workforce. What's the new blood coming through? And I'm absolutely delighted to have Chris May from Milkround join me. Over to you, Chris.
Hi. Yeah, so anyone that doesn't know about Milkround, we've also been running for about 20 years now. One of the newer companies to have joined within the Total Jobs group and align ourselves with CW, but that's kind of where we're at. Where I sit in, I'm the sales manager on the brand and have been with kind of early careers attraction for over 10 years now.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Chris. Just a little bit of housekeeping. The session is recorded and it will be sent out afterwards. If you have any questions, please use the chat function. Send those through and we'll tackle those at the end. We already have some questions come through, so don't be shy. And any that we don't get round to answering, we'll certainly contact by email. So that's at the end of the session. If you have any technical difficulties, please let us know through the chat function and we'll see if we can help you on that side of it. There will, pretty scary, pretty brave of us, but for it's a first for me, but there will be a couple of polls throughout, so please get involved, give us some context to what we're talking about, and fingers crossed they work. Okay, so over to the agenda. What are we talking about today? Well, what is as it says there, current state of the UK tech and higher education markets? What do they currently look like? Then really looking at what is important to a young candidate looking for a career in tech. Then no presentation, no webinar would be complete these days without a look at COVID-19 and what effect it's having on our particular subject. Then we're going to touch upon how people can future-proof a career in tech, and how if you can mirror that, then you're making yourself a more attractive employer. And really, as we wind up, we're going to be looking at successfully engaging with this new generation that's coming through. No longer the millennials, but Generation Z, the generation that has known the smartphone all of its life. And how do you successfully interact with them? And as I've said at the end, questions and answers. So hopefully there'll be plenty of those. Great. So what's the current market looking like? It's a quick recap. Just in the last 2 years, UK tech employment has grown at 40%, and it now accounts for 9% of the national workforce, with 2.93 million jobs created. The slight issue with that is that 72% of the workforce are now over 35, probably more heading towards my age, and that does, in an area that already has a talent gap, it means that as people are going to be retiring, if we're not filling that talent gap, we have a real problem down the line. So really, Chris, over to you. Are the cavalry coming?
Yeah, so I guess that challenge looks for a number of different solutions, and hopefully young talent is definitely going to be one of those. And yeah, if we look at the state of play there, currently out of the 2.4 million students recorded most recently in 2018, 282,000 of those were studying computer science, engineering, or technology. So there's a definite kind of route to it there. And I guess the reassuring number in that is that's a 20% increase in the last year, and something we're seeing further. So hopefully there's some way of kind of plugging that gap from that. If we have a look at Milkround more specifically, we know from our active database we've got in excess of 50,000 candidates that are already studying one of these subjects, kind of computer science, IT, telecoms, or related. And in addition to that, we've got over 30,000 candidates that have stated tech as their kind of preferred sector that they're looking to go into. So there's definitely some hunger for it there. There's some interesting kind of data around that. We'll explore it as we go along from this. I know one of them is that the Institute of Student Employers state that IT actually has one of the lowest retention rates, however, for students go into. But I think later on, Dom, you're going to be exploring in a bit more detail about how that kind of works and how it's maybe not all bad, actually, in terms of how it maybe looks as a headline. So I guess everyone, the first time, I know Dom kind of mentioned it before, we'd like to ask you a question for our first poll of the day. And this is going to be around how have you found kind of hiring young tech talent this year compared to 2019? So new for us all, but if we can ask for your input on this, we'll give you kind of 20, 30 seconds or so and see what kind of the landscape looks like from your side at the moment.
We can't vote, so we can't skew it either way. Relying on you, the audience. Okay, so easier. That's very, very interesting. I mean, I think we probably, certainly my daughter's friends are finding it very, very difficult to apply at the moment because there seems to be a real surplus of talent out there at the moment. So that would seem to chime with it being easier. Interesting. Thank you for joining in on that. So if we go to the next slide, looking at the state of the tech market and the young talent coming in, it's evident there are candidates that can fill these positions. But how do we make sure that employers can attract them to meet these roles, to fill those roles? So really one of the main points of this webinar, and to help recruiters such as yourselves, was understand how they can engage more efficiently with Generation Z. We joined forces with Milkround, the graduate recruitment experts, and in total reached out to over 600 candidates. Now these were students, graduates, and young tech talent. So we would, on the CW side, probably be speaking to that young tech talent that's already employed, or certainly maybe between jobs, but has had some kind of employment within the tech department. And we wanted to see what their thoughts and their feelings were about a career in tech. This was in August, just to give it some context, just when the market was coming back from that nadir in April, May, and it was beginning to come back quite nicely when we all thought we could go on holiday and get back and not have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So very, very relevant, I think. And these are the results, really. Over to you, Chris, looking at how it panned out.
Yeah, definitely. So the first question we asked was whether tech was their first choice or is their current first choice in terms of embarking on their careers. And it probably won't come as a massive surprise, really, that 63% of people currently working within tech saw it as their kind of first choice and kind of where they were starting out. There's some obvious bits there we know about. There's a long-term passion for this sector and what people want to get into, the desire to understand how things work and actually how that kind of carries on and how you can actually make a living out of stuff that maybe was pastimes or just general interest beforehand. Looking at the 16%, it's not a huge surprise because we've surveyed people across a kind of broader range of sectors. But I guess the optimist in me would consider that what we can understand here from an employment perspective is that there's 84% of candidates that we've all got the ability to change perceptions in and maybe attract that aren't naturally kind of leaning towards this type of career. Something we'll discuss a bit later when the dreaded COVID becomes a bit more of a topic of conversation is actually the impact that that's having and whether there's something kind of positive in that. The next, and if we go to the following slide, we find out it's not actually all bad when talking about students and graduates and that 16%, that actually 42%, so 2.5 to 3 times as many people would consider a career in tech if they were given the opportunity to understand more about it and develop skills in these areas. So we know that 1 in 5 of the student respondents said that they don't believe it's an opportunity for them. And knowing now that candidates aren't defined by the disciplinary degree that they study or even their kind of previous internship experience, actually there's a marketing opportunity there to see what we can do. And whilst 15% said that they don't feel they've had the opportunity to build their skills in this sector, it is reassuring actually that 85% have. So we know it's an area that if we're going to have kind of, we already have issues with funneling candidates into these roles, and it's only going to continue and get more, is just how can we kind of embrace this understanding and go further from there, really. Which I guess then takes us on to the second poll of the day. So we'd like to get a better understanding for you guys as a company in terms of what type of training you offer in terms of sort of new starters and employees? Is it internally, externally, or is it something you don't provide at the moment? So again, let's have that kind of weird 20-30 seconds of silence while kind of select your options and we look at the outcomes, really.
We need some countdown music, don't we? So I won't do an impression.
Okay, let's see if we've got. Yes, we do. So interesting here, kind of, yeah, so 6-9% brilliantly kind of internally have created structures and have kind of processes there for training. But I guess semi concerning here is that 1 in 5 that don't offer any training at all in terms of tech skills, regardless of role. So that's something definitely to take on, because if we move on to the next slide, we start to get a better understanding here of the number one reasons why a candidate might consider a career in tech. So Dom, you've probably got a bit more insight in terms of that's coming in post.
Definitely. I think if you look on the young tech candidates, certainly from the CWJobs respondent side, really, the top 2 things are things that have been the case for probably the last 30 years, 30, 40 years. That long-term passion, that kind of what brought us such a strong workforce in the 90s, those hobbyists that became the bedrock of our computing departments. And that natural curiosity on how things work rather, that brings them towards tech, and maybe tech or engineering, and they've chosen tech. And also the remote working opportunities, of which they're clearly abundant at the moment. But it's interesting that if that is a real priority to you and you don't particularly want to be traveling into town, or you want to be working in a silo, then that is actually it's actually recognised as a real opportunity within tech. And I think that's certainly been borne out in the last 7 months. And you've only got to look at actually Microsoft yesterday talking about their workforce of over 150,000 being offered permanent work at home placements. So, you know, they're certainly in the right space if they're looking for remote working opportunities. Not for everybody, but certainly the young tech candidates like the look of that.
Cool. And looking on the other side, and the students and graduates, salary. Sorry,
back a slide.
Thank you. So salary and benefits stands out, and I know in our conversations when putting this kind of webinar together, I know Dom was clear to point out actually that salary is very high on the agenda for people working in the industry, but there's more of a confidence and an understanding that comes with progression and with that development. For students and graduates, though, it is something that's naturally attracting them to it. So we know, again, from the ISC data, is that digital and IT actually stands above the average kind of entry-level salary for graduates. So there's an appeal in that. The other 2 are definitely very interested in terms of kind of the new challenge and the innovative aspect of this type of industry. We know we ran a survey in February this year to discuss what success looks like to students and how progression kind of is interpreted. And the number 1 was the opportunity to develop new skills. So we know 31% of our respondents saw their best way of getting ahead in their careers is developing this kind of suite of different kind of talents and abilities as they go along, and see themselves kind of equipping these to better prepare them for the future, even to the extent that almost 1 in 3 said that actually they would leave a role in pursuit of a new skill rather than necessarily salary or location or anything like that. So definitely something quite interesting there. We also know some of this could have been affected by COVID, and I think Dom's got some comment on this now, which is the following slide. Yep. Okay, it looks potentially like we might have lost Dom, so we're going to have to try and plug the gap here from there. Anyone in tech, can we see that, or should I continue?
Yeah, I think we've lost Dom for now. If you can continue, that'd be great, and hopefully he'll be able to join us later.
No, that's cool. So again, no huge surprise, and probably all of these technical issues we're facing are because we're sat in living rooms, bedrooms and kitchen tables at the moment. But what we can see here is quite a shift in terms of what they feel. And I know, looking at the data in a bit more detail on this, is that whilst everyone sees that they've been impacted in quite a strong way, the number one that really stands out for kind of students and graduates is that they don't feel that they can now continue to have the career that they were planning, which I know, actually sort of digging in a bit deeper into this, I know Dom has quite a lot around this, is actually how do we change that perception? Because a lot of companies are still struggling to fill roles that they have, and to do that. So how do we kind of develop it from there? And I think, talking about confidence, we can move on to the following slide. And again, what we can see here is confidence is kind of more kind of robust in terms of the young tech candidates. So we know, in terms of these candidates, they have a really good grasp of the industry already. So they're confident and assured that tech is the way forward, and it is something that is kind of vital to any business moving forward. They're also aware of their demand, and so it just kind of increases that reassurance. Whereas, kind of switching the other side to students and graduates, and understanding that their biggest concern at the moment is their huge lack of experience. So I think it's nearly 60% of candidates feel that their biggest weakness at the moment is their kind of experience to date. And it's on a bit of a kind of pivot, however, though. So whilst 33% kind of feel confident, it looks like quite a large number don't. But actually 30% are neither confident or unconfident at the moment. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to kind of change that pivot and increase that confidence. I know, again, looking at ISC data, it does kind of break down that IT and digital is the least affected of all sectors. So it's one that, in terms of our kind of marketing and messaging, we can drive forward. The only thing that I would kind of caveat that with at the moment is, as employers, we probably need to consider the impact that the last 7 months or so has had on students. So they may have had their final year at university curtailed. They may have had a lot of distance. They may have had their internships cancelled in the summer. So they really are coming to market slightly less prepared than maybe they have in the past. And this is something that's only going to continue moving forwards, unfortunately, with the current A-level generation entering a very different kind of higher education than anybody has for decades, really, and has had that. But if we go to the next, we can get a bit of a greater understanding of what is impacting candidate confidence. There's some really obvious bits. If we read a newspaper or watch the news at the moment, we probably do get the feeling that there's just too many candidates in the market and there's not enough jobs. But looks like Dom's rejoined us at the vital time to kind of add a bit of context to that.
Yeah, sorry, actual real life tech issues, blue screen of death. So it's amazing I managed to turn it around so quickly. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I think, going back to your point, if you are reading the papers and you kind of imagine that when it's talking about hospitality or general employment out there, it'd be very easy to transpose that onto the tech community and say, oh, there's so many people looking at the moment, and there's just not enough jobs out there. But it's actually patently untrue, and it does kind of talk to us that we're not doing a good enough job in to say what an opportunity is out there. And I'm not talking about maybe your company, but as a community, we're not making enough of the opportunity within IT, within tech departments, in all businesses across the economy. So I think that's a really key point to make, and your confidence within your business's attitude to IT and progressing IT within your businesses, and that will really calm their nerves on that side. I mean, there's the current situation with COVID, of course, and then Chris, really students with that lack of confidence in not having enough experience, but chicken and egg, and how do they get the experience, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think looking at the data that we've got, actually, in terms of the first three kind of bullet points here, the actual difference between opinions of kind of experienced versus kind of unexperienced students and graduates, there's very little deviation between the two. However, as mentioned before, the lack of experience in students is a real massive kind of influence at the moment in terms of their confidence, and that was probably the key one out of those 4 points, where there was a massive kind of difference between the two opinions in terms of that. So I think we kind of referred to it before, that once you get into the tech sector, you become more assured around kind of the stability that's in there and the requirement and the necessity to have the people like that within any business, really.
And by the look of it, it only takes a few months to feel that surge of confidence come back, and that actually this is the right place for me. There's huge opportunities within that. So if you can give that impression to your potential applicants or the people you want to appeal to, that's obviously a real positive in any job ad writing context, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's other areas as well. So if we move on to the next, we can talk very much about how candidates can help future-proof themselves as well. And this is really, really reassuring in terms of this. So on the left-hand side, we can see that people are currently working in an industry, and maybe this refers to, I think it was 69% off the top of my head, that do provide internal training, that there's 60% of people currently working that have retrained in the previous year or are considering doing it in the year to come. So kind of 3 out of 5 people. That's really reassuring that there's that. Even more reassuring for this future and plug in these kind of skills gaps going ahead is that 50% of students and graduates have taken some form of tech course in the last year. What we asked them about the kind of courses they were studying were data analytics, coding, and cybersecurity, which you'll all be really, really reassured. I know, Dom, you can kind of explore it a bit further with your confidence report.
I mean, the young candidates seem really eager to keep learning. And the good news is, if we look at the next slide, they're looking in the right areas. So just to explain that statement, they're spending a lot of time. 29% we're talking about cybersecurity, and there's cloud, there's pure coding, there's data analytics, artificial intelligence, and business intelligence. And the really good news is, in the recently released CWJobs Confidence Index Survey of 2020, IT leaders shared that these are exactly, I mean, a complete overlay of the skills required to future-proof their own businesses and for their own businesses to stay competitive. So these are students and young tech workers going out there and building the skills that happily match exactly what the requirement is out in there in the IT market. But having people with the right skills is only one part of the equation. Companies need to be able to reach out to these candidates and onboard them correctly and make them feel happy as soon as they join the company in those vital first few weeks. And in order to do that, they need to understand what drivers there are behind the career choices. If we go to the next slide, looking at the data, we see that the reasons that attract young candidates to tech roles are the same ones that make them stay in those roles. And this is supported from previous CWJobs research, showing how deep-rooted these factors are in the candidate's experience of both looking for work and then wanting to stay in that role. The main difference is company culture. 7% of young tech candidates compared to 17% of students and graduates say that a company's culture would attract them to a role, showing the importance of employer branding for people that are about to enter the workforce. Also, employer branding is a relatively new term that people have already started their career probably know less about. Another thing that really stood out was how a new challenge would attract young tech talent to a new role. And this is understandable given how fast tech changes. It's almost an accepted part of it. And if you start to slow down, you start to worry, maybe I'm not on the right kit, or maybe I need to jump to a new kit or be challenged more. We need to remember that these people have already started their career in tech and have already experienced what they can get out of it. So they're more passionate about it. And we need to speak to that side of it as well. So if we go to the next slide, I'll keep this pretty clean. I won't read those out. But when we asked our respondents why they want a career in tech, we got a lot of responses, very vocal on how much and how passionate they were about it. But it seems to talk about stability, seems to be one of the main points. Salary, undoubtedly, people generally know that tech is well paid. Working inside IT is well paid. There's the innovation side, and there's the development. So there's part of being something new, part of making something new, part of solving something. So it really reiterates again the main reasons that would make them accept, stay, and actually leave a role. And it's important to ingrain in every part of our recruitment strategy and hiring plan to make sure that we have a positive retention and improve that retention. Yeah, so if we go to the next slide, it also shows other areas that we can talk to this new blood coming through. The Generation Z and Generation Y. Generation Y, obviously millennials, much maligned millennials, I think very unfairly in many occasions. But Generation Z, and there's actually quite a stark and clear difference between them. Our partner Universum, the global employer branding experts, looked at how Generations Z and Y are different. And we can see here there are some similarities, but there are some key differences as well, and quite stark differences compared to previous generations. I've heard Steve Ward run through a whole presentation on this, and he looks at Generation Y and he talks about the fact that they're quite an acquisitive generation. They want to receive information, experiences, gather knowledge, grow themselves. Whereas if you look on the other side, it's there. The key word to me is belonging, being part of something valuable, receiving receiving knowledge, receiving financial pay, etc., salary, but that point about helping society, and this was actually done before March, so it's interesting to see the whole clap for carers, the whole focus on the NHS, the fact that some companies are, some public sector companies are becoming very, very popular in Generation Z's work search. So when they're looking out for employers of choice, we're seeing a lot more public sector clients rising up the ranks, and that again talks of their kind of social conscience and their social purpose being very, very important in the kind of work that they want to do. And I think these are key triggers in when you're describing what your job is about and what you are trying to solve. How does that particular role help your company help the country or the world or beyond? So these are important factors when you're trying to speak to Generation Z, whereas Generation Y is a little bit less important, but that's certainly come to the fore on Generation Z.
Yeah, I think it's also key there. If we look at 3 of the top 4, we've got a clear path of progression, we've got professional training, we've got security within their employment. So bearing that in mind for Generation Z, I think if we can go to the final poll, we've got a discussion here or a question here about whether your company is offering a clear progression path in terms of what they do. Do we have that poll? Yes, we do.
Yes.
Here's the final question of the day. So, yeah, do we offer a clear progression path for our young tech talent when they enter the business, especially bearing in mind the feedback we're getting from Universum? Let's give this another 20 or 30 seconds and see what we've got. Have we got? We do. Okay, so more than half of you, yes, but we've got a third of the audience saying no, they don't. So that's definitely interesting, knowing if that's real key drivers, and like you saw there, kind of 3 out of the top 10 or top 5 were really important to that. It's something to take away to your businesses and look at. Are we laying out a kind of defined plan for candidates when they join our business? Can they see the destination where they want to be going, and what's going to give them that confidence moving forward? I think touching on that as well, and looking at the current environment, let's move on to the next one, and some questions that we asked actually around remote working and what we can see. Yep, and what we can see here is, again, kind of distinct changes, and I think Dom touched before that it seems to not take very long actually involved in something. It doesn't take long at all for them to join and to see the real benefits that come in. And what we can see here is that half of the young tech candidates at the moment believe that they don't need an office to be around. They feel confident in their own surroundings and do that. Actually, only 3 in 10 would prefer to be in an office environment. Make of that as you will, especially when we look at the final, and only 1 in 4 feels that they would miss that face-to-face contact when working remotely. But again, let's kind of move quickly over to the students and graduates, and we see quite a distinctive difference between the two here. So not a too dissimilar number feeling that they can work without an office. They've probably done some virtual seminars and lectures and bits like that, so they have a bit more confidence and comfort. But then relating again to that universal data around that sense of belonging and feeling part of something, that preference to working in an office environment is greater, and definitely nearly double the number of people would miss that face-to-face contact when working remotely. I know it's conversations we've had with our teams is that the pre-existing team that worked in an office before kind of the pandemic and everything that's changed, we had relationships that we could move virtually, and we could change that. Actually, for onboarding new people, and if you're joining a business for the first time, and we've got some stuff kind of towards the end here of how we can help kind of virtualize some of this stuff and make real, because it's really key that people, it's very difficult, I guess, to kind of learn a culture of a business like this, like we're doing now. And so how can we kind of make that different? How can we make that kind of as possible as we can, even in kind of the testing situation that we've got now? Which I think if we move on, Dom, you've got a bit more now.
Yeah, I mean, here are some examples of such employers. All the names on this list have a really diverse and established tech graduate programs, and they're really popular among students and graduates. One name that stands out for me is MI6 Secret Intelligence Service, and that was made really clear by the Universum Talent Insight Survey from 2020. MI6 was at the top of the top 10 lists of public sector, and it was actually interesting to see how far public sector companies had moved up. Survey shows a really fascinating shift as companies in the public sector surpass many traditional private sector businesses in terms of attractiveness to students. The NHS and police now also rank highly but specifically for their tech roles. So they are being recognised as valuable to the wider community and society, but also the fact that they have real opportunities within tech. Anyone that stands out there for you, Chris?
Yeah, I think from a student and graduate perspective, a company like M3 is really key, because there's always been that transition from the academics to the kind of applied nature of this kind of industry, and the fact that sometimes it can take curriculums a bit of time actually to move as quickly as an industry that does move as fast as it does and kind of evolves where it is. So what they do is they kind of do a lot of the attraction and hiring and initial training to turn kind of computer science graduates into work-ready individuals, and that can be anything from software development to financial crime roles and bits like that on that. And they do a lot of that for large global institutions that probably would find it much more difficult to have their own programs and their own training, is that they're able to outsource that but have people kind of ready to go for them, really. So I think that's really key in this market, is how do we kind of as quickly as possible fill that period between being inexperienced and experienced, which I think we've seen here. Those perceptions and that security and that confidence all changes very quickly. So how can we make that happen as best as we can, really? I think that's a really good example of people that work in that area driving that kind of change and development for candidates.
Yeah, and they're quite a diverse range of companies that you see there, and indeed it's not it's not prescriptive on what you need to do to be a company attractive within the tech space, because it's down to the projects you do. But what is changing within tech is that the challenges of a diverse workforce are really being put out there, and the fact that people are working from home means that that there are probably new talent pools that can be tapped into. So there is this young talent. There are candidates with disabilities that maybe couldn't have got into central London or central Manchester that now are capable of, or now truly considered to be capable of working with a company. And why not? If their skills are there and it's just the travel which is the issue, then open our eyes to those possibilities, career changes, and people working remotely around the world potentially. And that was one of the things in the Microsoft article yesterday, the fact that it was going to be acceptable if you wanted to move country to remain with Microsoft. just you wouldn't have your desk at your office anymore if you went to this permanent remote working. Then there's the championing of diversity and inclusion. At CWJobs, we have our own Women in Tech network internally at our company to improve our gender balance. Now, how does that work? Well, it involves a mentorship program, so women can be coached by some senior female co-workers. If you can't see it, you can't become it, that kind of mentality that, you know, you can see somebody higher up the ladder that you think you can be like and hopefully surpass with their coaching mentorship, as well as running focus groups to best understand how women can be supported within that workspace to improve that retention. Because if you're continually on a hamster wheel of losing, you know, bringing women in but losing them, then you're never really going to increase that balance, that ratio of women in the business. And similarly, we also have the Black Network. That's not specifically tech, but it is looking at how to make the BAME community feel more confident within the environment. They are being supported, they're being crucially listened to, and true change is happening. And these things will help on the retention side and increase the dial compared to your competitors. So additionally to that, talk about it in the market, show that you are doing that in the market, and by having these tags on your job adverts or mentioning them in job adverts, you're talking to the applicants and those that know, for example, Tech UK, a great community of companies, governmental companies, private companies, a program of work throughout the year. I really recommend it. Not so much face-to-face this year for obvious reasons, but a really good resource for companies to share their tech best practice. And Tech Talent Charter, this is absolutely free to join. You anonymously fill in a survey and then about the build of your workforce, and then you receive the results of that survey back. But the crucial thing to me is the fact that members of Tech Talent Charter, for example, on average have a 24% women inclusion in the tech workforce compared to the national average of 16%. So they're either doing something right or they're learning something from their peers within the Tech Talent Charter. And that's something I'd really advise people to reach out about. I do go on about it, but I feel really passionately about that. So these are ways to invite, care for, and make sure that people feel included once that they have come into your business, and then finally show that you are welcoming these people and it's important to your business. Other ways to improve the job adverts are, and this is done time and time again, probably the main thing, well, the first 2 points, the main things on job ads, and we still don't see it across the board, but salary information and location. I know there's always that paranoia about, if I put the location, I'm just going to be called by people that want to show me their candidates, as it were. But these are absolutely vital. If you can bat away the people that you don't necessarily want to get in touch with you about it, these are how you're going to access the best applicants. The second point has always been there, but that's the complaint that candidates not being given feedback, or it's very late feedback, and it's a real pain point. And this will come back to bite you, I think, especially when there's a surfeit of candidates that are applying and maybe there's a large amount not being replied to, because these are candidates that are going to be very valuable in the future. And if they have a great memory of your company, that maybe they didn't get a job, but they were treated with respect, had given a really good reason why maybe they weren't up to scratch in the interview, I think that you will, as a company, gain in the long run. And finally, a lack of transparency in the actual application process. Remember that you're maybe dealing with people coming into the workplace for the first time. They're very nervous about it. We've already seen that lack of confidence. If you can bolster that confidence by telling them exactly when and what stages they can expect, what will happen in the interview, for example, that will maybe be the difference between someone pressing the apply button and maybe not bothering, and maybe being the man or woman that is better than the person that you eventually end up taking. So be transparent. All these 3 points are so vital to maximising the applications. And at the moment, yes, there are probably very, very unusually a higher than normal amount of candidates on the market. But if you get this right, when it does tighten up again, you'll be in an advanced stage there as well. So great advice here. Other ways to improve the hiring process, video recruiting certainly comes to the fore in this period. And we work with a company called Cameo. You can speak to your account manager to get more information on this, but effectively it's bespoke interview video recruiting software. It's not trying to bend Zoom into shape. This is going to be pre-recorded questions that you can pass around your management team to okay, and then you can have a candidate answering those questions and then pass that candidate potentially around, rather than them having to do 5 Zoom calls, for example. There's Good & Co, completely free psychological profiling kit that we have, and that can look at the kind of team fit issues. There's also some real true life artificial intelligence kit that we have called Instant Candidate Recommender. This is also free, but what it does, it looks at the kind of profiles of people that are applying to your roles, and then looks at similar profiles within our CV database and gives you a menu of potential candidates that you might also want to reach out at. That's really clever. And the last one is probably more of a Milkround speciality. So I'll let Chris explain this.
Yeah, so we know, and it's no matter what's changed with recruitment moving online or being artificial intelligence as part of the process, face-to-face has always been completely key, and still is now, in terms of how you can showcase your company and your opportunities and provide case studies and bits like that. Naturally, that's much more difficult than it ever has been at the moment. Good luck wandering into HR asking if you can go onto campus, into absolute hotbeds of COVID at the moment, and take some members of there with some goodies, a squeaky giraffe or a water bottle or something like that. It's just not really possible anymore in terms of that. So what we can now provide is kind of virtual events, and I guess the benefit to us is we've got the database where we're organically kind of registering candidates week on week, so we can create audiences to do anything really, ranging from kind of augmenting the idea in the past that you could just invite 20 graduates into a room, giving them an Amazon voucher and some lunch, and ask their opinions to help shape kind of what your plans are moving forwards. We can make that virtual for you now, and to do that, it could be some skill sessions, especially we've said here, if people can see the opportunity to learn the industry, they're more likely to be attracted to it. So what kind of sessions can you run to give people insights, showcasing candidates and people that, like we can see, if they're kind of a few months or a couple of years in, they become real ambassadors for the industry. So how can you do that? And I know, kind of back to the diversity element, that's really important as well, is to showcase kind of that variety and that diversity of workforce that you have encourages that future workforce to be more diverse, and all the benefits that come with that. So again, as with the others, if anyone wants to understand more about that, by all means reach out, and we can provide a bit more kind of bespoke detail with what we can do, which I think actually brings us to a close now. And so I think the final slide just gives our contact details if anyone does want to reach out, and then Dom, you were going to look at the questions that we've had and potentially provided during.
Yes, so there's one question that's come through, and it says, have you observed a relevant difference between genders in young tech talent when searching and finding a job? Now, sorry, I can't see who asked that, but thank you for that question. One of the issues is trying to get any gender information from our applicants, because it's actually a very dangerous thing to ask when an application goes through, in case there's perceived any tinkering in the background. So really, it's the end result of, we will see the end result of that, if that is the case, in 2 or 3 years' time, when we see what the balance is between the in the ratios of women and working in tech. But actually intercepting those applications and asking if someone is female or male is a very dangerous game at the moment. I don't know if it's any different on the graduate side, Chris. I know that
it is slightly different. It's not compulsory, but it's one of the questions we are able to ask at registration. We obviously can't share that information, but in terms of giving you an idea of the landscape. So what we do know is the best part of 70% do provide a gender, and of the people that do provide it, about 65% are female. How that breaks down kind of more forensically into the tech candidates, we can delve into it, and if someone wants to follow up, we can ask. The other thing, actually, we partnered last year with Universum and created a kind of ebook, which again we can share if anyone wants to ask. And it provided, using their data and the questions they ask, because they use gender quite specifically, and so it gives you kind of 10 ways to effectively attract women in STEM careers. And it very much use their data to look at the motivators and drivers. So by all means, kind of reach out, and we'll see what we can do in terms of providing more insight into that if you need it.
Great, thank you. So we do have some other questions. Another one of the questions was, how have the number of jobs posted and applications made in tech graduates changed in 2020 compared to 2019? So have you got any information on that to hand, Chris? Because I know.
Yeah, luckily that was asked in advance, so we could actually we could go and look at some data, which was good. I won't bore anyone too much with tables that we've got, and again we can follow this up afterwards. But yeah, it was a snapshot. We started Jan and Feb quite a bit higher than we had year on year in terms of job postings and also candidates. There's no surprise from March. It even got as low. I think our nadir was around the May period, where there was actually a 79% drop in tech roles on the site. But again, that probably mirrored quite equally with just our general kind of carrying of position.
The 80% mirrors CW actually almost exactly, Chris. So that's interesting.
Okay, but at the same time, it was a 48% drop in applications. So less jobs equals less applications. However, the people that were still in a position to continue hiring would have seen increased numbers of candidates apply for each particular role as a result of that. Actually, looking at September, we're 30% down on jobs, but actually 7% up on applications. So we've seen a return, or a partial return, for jobs, and definitely an overarching return in terms of applications on that as well. And interestingly, looking at last year's data, October and November are traditionally our strongest months seasonally for jobs and applications. So it will definitely be a trend worth looking at in a couple of months' time as well, to see how that's continued.
Great. Yeah, the curve kind of goes down like that, doesn't it? With and then it's coming back pretty strongly, actually. So another question was, did the survey include local / cultural differences? Were there any findings accordingly? The flat answer is no, but it's an area of interest to us, and we'll be looking to share more on this. It could be we focus, and this is the beauty of asking questions and kind of guiding us on what would be valuable to you. Questions like this, we'll get to our marketing department. Maybe we can focus on that. Certainly regionally, the north, if there is a north-south divide, for example, maybe differences between Scotland and differences around the UK. So yes, a wholehearted no, but watch this space, and we'll see if that becomes something that we can look into further. Could you include salary expectations in remote / flexible working? So we've covered remote working in the slides, but not salary expectations. Specifically, salaries are ordinarily higher than the general salaries out there. In 2019, the Institute of Student Employers, on their annual student recruitment survey, the average salary for digital and IT careers was 30 grand, which is higher than the overall, which is actually 29,000. These are a median based on salaries of self-selecting sample of ISE members. So we didn't ask it, but ordinarily we would expect inflated and higher rates for tech to get the tech talent to come in there. Chris, I think this is one's for you. What are graduates mostly looking for when searching for the first role in tech?
Yeah, again, I think we touched on that as part of that. So looking for stability, they're looking for opportunities to develop, they're looking for salaries and good benefits, much like you just mentioned before, in terms of the expectation is it will be higher than the norm. so it will attract people that are motivated by those areas. Again, I think it's worth looking at. I mentioned it before. We've got the Universum piece that we can share that gives kind of real top tips based on these learnings on what you can add to job descriptions. And it's quite interesting when you get into it that I think sometimes other industries have probably been a lot better at using job ads to really attract people from different areas to come and apply, whereas tech and IT roles tend to be quite consistent. So there's some learnings there definitely in terms of kind of other facets and other factors that you can include in your job descriptions. But we can definitely share, if anyone reaches out, we can share this Universum report that we partnered with, because it adds some really nice insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, the contact details are still on screen. Don't be shy in reaching out to us. We will endeavour to get back to you as soon as possible. Another question coming from the audience: do young people want to work at home, or are they able to? Well, there was that particular slide that you went through, Chris, wasn't there, where there was a real desire to work from home, particularly if you'd experienced an office environment. It seems like people, it wasn't so important to graduates because they wanted to feel a bit of the buzz of the office. And then once you felt a bit of the buzz of the office, yeah, I'll go and work from home, thanks. So it seems perfectly acceptable from our own tech department's experience. It doesn't seem like people just end up doing nothing. I think there are ways to monitor that. There are ways to manage that. So yes, thanks for that, Karen. It seems a resounding yes. That's
yeah, I just add slightly there. I think that logistics is worth considering though, especially with students and graduates. So the old adage before was finish university, move to London, share a house with lots and lots of people, have a tiny box room and some shared space. Actually, that's probably changed some of this outlook as well. So I think some of the reluctance to do it could well be the logistics of having a safe, comfortable space to work at home, because properties and bits, if you've lived in halls and done that, it's very different now to having to find a comfortable space to work. So maybe that does also mean people like the idea of the office, to have somewhere to call your workspace versus your living space, really. And that's going to be even more accentuated with the younger person, less likely to have their own properties yet and doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good additional point, actually. There's another question in, I can't anonymously, but you've spoken about diversity in females in tech, as well as that sense of belonging, stroke contributing to the community, being really important to Generation Z. Have you noticed any shift in key wants, stroke desires from employers, given the BLM movement and social unrest, which has been in the spotlight in 2020? Absolutely. I think that the BLM stuff caught many people, many companies off guard. It is not something that's fashionable and going to go away. I think that there's been, what Generation Z have done with it is really enabled it, and that it's here to stay. And I think that they deserve a huge amount of credit, and millennials as well, for really making this statement that this is very important to them. And I think companies really have to wake up to the fact that there's a hell of a lot more to be done for the BAME community, and that starts with, certainly I know at Total Jobs Group, our parent company, listening forums, being very listening to your black employees without judgment, and making a real statement on going that extra mile to get black applicants or BAME applicants through the door to build a community, and not simply, as I can't remember her name, Shireen's second name off the top of my head, but she was the consultant, Shireen Daniels, and she was talking about this horrendous situation of one in, one out, where you have one black person on a team, and that's us doing our job, and when they leave, we're allowed to get another one. Utterly ridiculous. Let's be more inviting and really change that dial. But I think that it's certainly not going away. Companies need to do a lot more, and the pressure will rise and rise until if nothing is being done. I think that the pressure is going to keep rising in companies.
Yeah, I was just having a quick look now, actually, and I knew there was. So we've always had kind of insight days for women in tech and women in business with a lot of the large consulting firms. we've started to see kind of the beginnings of this. So EY this year have a Black History in Business program now, which is kind of like an internship insight program that they run. And that wasn't seen before this year. So this is new. I know PwC are doing something very similar as well. So we're starting to see the becomings of it actually being kind of fully fledged kind of introductory programs as well that people can sign up to.
Good. But yeah, a rapidly changing landscape on that side. And companies will get left behind if they're not careful. They need to really step up to the plate. So another question, among the 6 different popular skills to acquire in the next year slide under retraining, which one do you think will be in the top skills to have in a decade? Really good question. And I'm going to answer that with cybersecurity. I think coding, yes, the software can change. Artificial intelligence, I mean, it's pretty tough actually, because I think artificial intelligence will also be up there. But I think cybersecurity, the more complicated and interconnected things become, the greater the danger of unplugging one thing will bring it all crashing down. So the greater importance put on cybersecurity. So I think cybersecurity is one of the absolute key skills if you're an applicant to really stay on top of, because that's what businesses will be absolutely and increasingly paranoid about, particularly with the remote working, which has really shown the importance of cybersecurity and indeed people working in the whole infrastructure parts of the IT department. Just seeing if there's any more questions. I think that's it, which brings us almost to exactly an hour. I'm delighted to say we've kept the audience for most of it, so hopefully it's been really useful. Hopefully there's some takeaways from this. And like I say, I'll just reiterating, if you do have any questions or you would like some more information in certain areas, please get in touch. We'd be delighted to help you out. So thank you very much from me, and thank you to Chris for my momentary disappearance. Yeah, so thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.
Sure, thank you.